Welcome back to 110 Daily on the 110 Sports Network. Josh Doring, Chris Brown, they are here with me. Humor me, please, gentlemen. You know the rules. Nice manners. Humor me, please, and thank you. This is all I ask. It's not a big ask. It's just one that I am pretty passionate about here. There's a rumor that Chris and I might have similar subject matter for our Humor Me Pleases today. So, Josh, why don't you go first so that we don't have to bounce. We'll just go next. We'll let you go first, and then we'll discuss some baseball afterwards. But Josh, good manners. Humor me, please. What do you got?
Humor me, please, when I talk about Naomi Osaka because I want to, and I find her fascinating. Yeah, she's the best female tennis player in the world and is dominating everybody and probably is going to win another major. But that's not really what I want to talk about. I want to talk about Naomi Osaka, the person and the personality. I haven't really seen another athlete on her level like her. She is so authentic. Sometimes it's kind of awkward because she just doesn't try and be anything other than herself. And I absolutely love it. When you watch her in her post-match interviews, she's just there having a conversation. And it's not polished, so it almost feels unnatural, and I think that that's a really good thing. So, for example, after she beat Serena Williams handily, these are some of the highlights from the on-court interview she had. She was terrible at the beginning, which makes it even more impressive. She won the first set 6-3 after going behind early. She talked about how she was intimidated and scared playing Serena again, and then eventually sort of reminded herself that she enjoys playing at the Australian Open, and so she didn't want to embarrass herself. And that was kind of the motivation that got her going, and where she won in straight sets, and it was not particularly close. They asked the guy doing the interview asked her about it. He said something about it sort of looked like you were able to anticipate Serena's serves, and obviously that's a big part of her game and part of her legacy and impact on tennis is just how powerful her serve is. Osaka goes, well, there are really only about two spots, so I was just guessing. I gotta go somewhere, so I picked one or the other. Then they were asking her about sort of her routine because she's got this day in between because the final's not till Saturday and she won Wednesday night, so she's got this little break. And she goes, yeah, so I'm gonna tell you a story. Usually I get Japanese food. I think she said it was the day before she plays, but I decided to get Greek food before this time, and then I saw that the Greek guy whose name I can't remember beat Rafael Nadal, and I thought I should probably do that again. That was her press conference. That was her little interview on the court. Where in the world do you hear stuff like this from one of the best athletes in the world?
I don't think anywhere.
Right, and this is very much on brand for her. This is not new. I made an intentional decision after that match ended. I want to stay and watch this post-game interview because I'm interested in what she has to say. And it's this really weird dynamic because she very much kind of acts like this happy-go-lucky, innocent person who's happy to be there, right? That's how this comes across. But at the same time, she is very much from the Kobe Bryant school of Mamba mentality and has a ridiculous amount of mental toughness and is a killer on the court. This sort of innocent, happy, joking, fun stuff doesn't apply when she's playing.
Right.
And particularly, she had a stretch in this match against Serena where she had a couple double faults. It was starting to kind of fall apart, and you thought maybe Serena's going to get back in the second set and take it to a third one, and who knows what happens. And then all of a sudden, it was just over. She just said, yeah, we're done with that. I'm going to make sure this doesn't get interesting. And, Serena's got right. So I feel like Serena's more in this LeBron, just the aura, the intimidation, just by their sheer presence and the greatness of their careers and all of that kind of thing. Right. So Serena's going to go invest in the Angel City team coming into NWSL with all of these famous people, Flash of LA. They're supposed to be the big brand and all that. Naomi Osaka is also very interested in business. She's a very just curious person. But she decides, I'm going to go invest in the North Carolina Courage, who happened to be one of the best teams in the world, the standard bearer in NWSL. And she did so partially because she was really happy with the stuff they were going to commit to do in the community and things like that. it's just this difference that I find fascinating. And I just appreciate that she's so authentic. She just sort of has a conversation with you and you can relate to her because she doesn't sound like this polished robot. She's just this tennis player who is interested in life and happens to really enjoy playing tennis, but also doesn't make tennis her everything. She has other interests in life and it's a game. And that was one of the other things she said. She said, I kind of just remember that it's a game and it's supposed to be fun. I'm at my best when I'm having fun. I just want to take a moment to appreciate that.
You know, she's so charismatic, and she also, and this is something I don't get a chance to say a lot about athletes who play sports that are completely individual, is that they get an opportunity. Like, you just can't ask the cookie cutter questions to somebody who plays an individual sport. At least not to well, let me rephrase. There aren't as many cookie cutter responses for somebody who plays an individual sport because, it's easy to say, if Mookie Betts hits 3 home runs, but they win, but there's 3 solo shots and they win 3-0, then he can say the pitching staff was incredible. They went out and
you can point to your teammates.
Right. And there's nobody for Naomi to point to other than, thanking her coach and her family and the support, right? But that's one question. So leaning into the ability to be a little bit more charismatic and personable because it's a personal sport, she's also really good at, because it's right, you have to come up with something other than, well, we're going to go back and watch film, our teammates and I, and we're going to get locked in for the championship game. The work's not done. But sure, she's going to do some of that, but it's like, well, yeah, I'm also going to eat some food. Yeah, and I'm going to, right? So there's an opportunity there. And there are some people in the golf world who are good at this as well, and good at just sort of little insights. And the other part of this is that she's 23. It's just a lot easier to relate to a 23-year-old who hasn't been doing it for a long time and is just still, to a certain extent, probably just every once in a while has to take a step back and be like, whoa, this is what I'm doing. I mean, LeBron isn't fazed by the NBA finals anymore, right? I mean, it's just a thing. It's just what he does. And Serena, the same thing. And they're locked into who they are as athletes, and Naomi still gets to, right, because that's just, right, you talked about their intimidation and all of that, and what all-time greats like Serena and LeBron, just what they do and what their presence does and demands. But she very much leans into the ability to be a little bit more personable because she plays a sport that's purely individual, at least at the very highest level. And that's cool. And she's just very good at it. She's not trying too hard. She's not trying too hard to be something she's not. And that's incredibly cliche. And I'm like kind of cringing at what I just said, but it still is very true.
Yes. Well said. I wonder how much top athletes like that, there's got to be, training that they typically get as far as like media training. And so part of me is like glad that, I don't know, there's got to be this, like, I'm sure there's like this book on how you're supposed to handle it and give all these sort of answers. I'm kind of glad that she isn't, right? She's not going the normal course. Like, I hope it doesn't change. I hope she can kind of like continue to be unique and that she doesn't try to, like, somebody doesn't tell her you need to give more proven PR answers because that we know is less risky. Like, I hope that she can stay her style.
For sure.
Chris, let's talk about the Padres. Let's talk about Fernando Tatis. Let's talk about his 14 years, $340 million. Would you like to go first, or would you like me to go first? I am cool with either.
Why don't you go ahead?
Okay. This is an appreciation more than anything else. The Padres are literally in the same division as the team that just keeps spending money. They're in LA. There are few franchises on the planet that are worth more than the Los Angeles Dodgers, and few teams that make more franchises that make more money every year than the Los Angeles Dodgers. And you know who's going toe to toe with them right now? The friggin' San Diego Padres. And they keep,
That's right.
and it's not just one deal. It's not just 2 deals, 3 big deals, and everywhere else in between, they continue to reinforce the fact, the stance that they are up for this, right? I mean, you're going to go and sign Trevor Bauer? We're going to sign Fernando Tatis Jr. to a 14-year, $340 million contract, and let's go. And they haven't shied away from, right, because to a certain extent, I mean, the Dodgers aren't anywhere near the end of their reign, right? And so in there is a chance that 3 of the next 4 years, you feel like the Padres are the second best team in the NL, but they lose their division to the Dodgers and have a bad night in the wild card, and they're out of the playoffs like that. That could absolutely happen, and that could be a reason to shy away from this a little bit and to not go all in the way that the Padres are going in all in. But the Dodgers I talk about intimidating. There aren't many franchises, especially in this country, that are more intimidating than the Dodgers, and specifically more intimidating than the Dodgers right now. And the Padres are up for it, and I love it. And they continue to do it. It's blow for blow. It really is. I mean, the Dodgers go and get one of the most interesting personalities in baseball right now, but also one of the best pitchers in baseball. And the Padres, we're going to lock up our 21-year-old who's played less than a full season worth of games, but he's freaking awesome. And we're going to lock him in. So we've got him, we've got Machado, we've got a pitching staff. We're ready to go, and we're going to go toe-to-toe with the Dodgers. My biggest flack with baseball is that it's just okay for teams to not prioritize winning. Like, that's just, like, at the foundation of it. It's just okay for owners to not spend money and prioritize making money over winning baseball games. And the Padres could do that. And right now they have all the reason to, because the Dodgers are there. And they'll probably still keep going to the wild card, even if they're not a wild card quality team, even if they're much better than that. And they're still going toe to toe. So an appreciation for the Padres and what they're doing, because they are about it, and I love it.
Yeah, 100%. I'm right there with you. The Dodgers-Padres rivalry is going to be fun for a long time. Barring a trade, Mookie Betts, Fernando Tatis Jr. are going to be in that division competing for at least the next decade. like decade, not like 4 or 5 years. No, like 10 plus. I think 11 for Betts, and then of course 14 for Tatis Jr. Man, that is going to be something to watch. Yeah, I'm right there with you. I mean, it's incredible. Tatis Jr. has played in, like you mentioned, less than a full season's worth of games, 143 games, and it's amazing how much he has taken the sport by storm in that time. I mean, obviously, you can look at the numbers and see that he's hit 300 and that he's hit basically 40 homers and stolen 30 bases in less than a full season's worth of games, and that sort of speaks for itself. But also just the way that he plays, the exciting, dynamic, energizing, fun nature of Fernando Tatis Jr. He's this emerging young face of the game, and he's done it so quickly. Like, he came up at such a young age. He came up at 20, and he's already become this guy who's one of the faces of the game. This is the longest contract in baseball history, 14 years. It surpasses 13 years for Bryce Harper and Giancarlo Stanton. And despite it being the longest contract in baseball history, he's only going to be 36 when it ends. I say only, which that makes it a lot different. I mean, obviously there's plenty of risk involved in any long-term deal, but it makes it a lot different than Albert Pujols or Miguel Cabrera, where the teams are paying them tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars in their late 30s. Obviously Tatis Jr. is a shortstop, so there's, different aging things to consider, but it's the third largest contract in total amount handed out, the sixth largest contract in major professional sports history. When it expires in 2035, Manny Machado will be 42, Mike Trout will be 43, Albert Pujols will be in his mid-50s, Tiger Woods will be 60, Tom Brady will be 57 and coming off his 12th Super Bowl win. Anyway,
I'm not sure I was ready for you to tell me that in just 14 years Tiger Woods is going to be 60 years old. I'm not sure I was ready for that this morning.
Yes,
but
a little bit of a
man,
yeah. So like you said, Josh, talking about giving real credit to the Padres here, do not believe MLB owners when they cry poor. San Diego is a big city, but they are a bottom five media market
Yep.
in Major League Baseball. And here they are with a transcendent, charismatic star. And guess what they did that's so refreshing? They brought him up when he was ready. They did not leave him in the minors to manipulate his service time.
How
They
about
said,
that?
he looks like he's ready. He's only 20, but hey, he looks like he's ready and can help us win now. Let's bring him up. Now they're doing what they can, like you said, to surround him with impact talent. They had impact talent there. They had Manny Machado and Eric Hosmer and all these other guys. But then, oh, look, now we're going to add Blake Snell and Yu Darvish. And like they're adding all this talent around him. And then they blow him away with a lifetime contract before he'd even reached arbitration, let alone gotten anywhere close to sniffing free agency.
Mm-hmm.
Now, obviously, this is a deal that, like any long-term deal, and especially for a guy who's played less than a full season in the majors, is going to have some risk for the team. But this is the kind of generational talent that makes taking that risk make sense. And like I mentioned, he's not going to be making the kind of money that Pujols and Cabrera and even Stanton will be making in their late 30s because of how early this deal is starting. We don't really even have like a mold for this. These kind of huge deals that have been handed out to guys like Stanton and Harper, they've been they haven't been 33 years old when the deal started, but they haven't been 22 either.
Mm-hmm.
Like it just doesn't, you don't have this kind of mold to have it be starting. And it's interesting because it gets a little technical, but the way this contract is structured, they're buying out basically 1 year, the next upcoming year of him making roughly major league minimum, and then 3 years of arbitration where he would be making more money, but nowhere near what his value actually is. So essentially what this is a $300 million contract that begins in 4 years. And that $300 million is exactly what they gave Manny Machado a few years back. And Machado was older than Tatis Jr. will be 4 years from now. Machado was older at the time. So this idea that like Tatis Jr. is already a more valuable player than Manny Machado, and like what we know about how players age and improve, like, is it possible he could get better? Yeah, I mean maybe it is. Like it seems
He's not in his
crazy
prime yet.
He's not in his typical prime years, even as like the definition of when your prime years start kind of keeps getting moved younger and younger. He's still not even in those years yet. And there's this idea that like, even if you want to say a player might start slowing down and they're around 30, he's got 8 years before he turns 30. Like it's just, there's just no like thing to compare this to. It's so remarkable. The value that he's going to provide this franchise for years to come is spectacular. You have this talent, you have these numbers, this production that you think you're going to get from him, but also just he's fun. He is exciting. That is something baseball needs more of.
Amen.
More of. He's dynamic. He's talented. Makes the sport more fun. And there's nothing better than that.
He's dynamic. He's talented, and he's not playing for the Yankees or the Dodgers.
Look at that.
Right. I mean,
right.
The list of players that are dynamic and talented and young and exciting, and don't play for the Dodgers or the Yankees. The list isn't very long right now.
Right.
And the guy and arguably the most exciting and talented guy is a guy who can't for the life of him get a good baseball team around him. And that's the other part of this, is that the Padres, and maybe in a reverse order slightly, because they signed, Tatis is sort of the last thing they've done this offseason, and sort of it'll be the sort of centerpiece in the Venn diagram, in 5 years of this offseason, but it's the last thing that they've done.
Mm-hmm.
And so they're also, like you said, investing in surrounding talent around him, because paying Mike Trout a crap ton of money, but putting nobody around him to help him win baseball games, almost useless. I mean, people will pay to come see the Angels play because they want to go see Mike Trout play. So in that way, it's not. But like, Mike Trout is there's never been a more irrelevant superstar. And the Padres have also done a good job making sure that Tatis is not going to be that, at least not initially, which I can also appreciate. And it's not completely the Angels' fault. I mean, right? It's not like the Angels are selling every good thing that comes through their franchise other than Mike Trout. It's not like, but still, the point is the same. They're also not throwing $300 million at Manny Machado, and doing all of the other things that they've done.
And yeah, I think the contract part of this from a timing standpoint is interesting because this is right. I feel like the closest comparison you have are those Bryce Harper and Manny Machado deals. It's by no means the same thing, but this idea of if you give them the long-term contract early at a lower average annual value, they'll still sign it because of the security. But it also puts you in a much better position because you're not escalating into $35 million contracts for dudes who are 37, 38 years old. You're paying for their prime and then a little, the same amount as they decrease as it goes farther. It's the same way I felt with the Bryce Harper deal. If it works, right, and you invest enough talent with the rest of that team, by the time you're paying him more than he's worth, you've got a World Series ring or you've got 4 division titles and you've been successful and he's been really good and you're getting his best years theoretically. And that even applies more to this because they didn't even wait for the first free agency to happen. Like you said, Chris, they went, okay, we're not even going to mess with arbitration. This dude's making the minimum. We can't have that. We need to make it clear that this is our future. So we're just going to go start paying him as soon as we possibly can, get all that stuff taken care of. Which means that at the end of this contract, he's even at a younger age now. 36 is obviously not young when you're talking about a professional athlete. But it's very clear to me that teams have learned their lesson from those awful contracts where you pay a guy at the back end of his prime for 10 years and you don't really get that many good seasons out of them, as opposed to doing it when they're 22, 25, 27, and you know that half that contract you're going to get above what you're paying for them, because it's a more balanced deal in terms of how you're spreading this money out. So you're not escalating it at the end, and you've got more years of their prime where you are expecting them to be one of the best players in baseball. It just makes sense for both sides. So for everybody's sake, I'm glad this is now the route that baseball teams are taking.
Right. You have the Tigers, for just as an example, they're set to pay Miguel Cabrera roughly $100 million more. He is already older now than Tatis Jr. will be when his contract expires. You have Albert Pujols, of course. He's only got 1 more year left, but right, the Angels have been paying him huge sums of money for the last 3 or 4 years when he's just, not surprisingly, fallen off at the plate. So yeah, you're not going to have that kind of scenario. Yeah.
And then it forces you to go into this cycle where you don't have the money to go pay that guy and Mike Trout and the other people you need to go build a World Series team, whether it's so the Yankees have done this and the Phillies just got out of doing this, where they're sort of on this next set, right? That World Series team, when they were paying all those aging veterans, they had to go through the rebuilding process. And if you want to call it rebuilding for the Yankees or Phillies or any of these big market teams, maybe there's a better word. But the point is that the Yankees can't keep spending that money on top of each other. You got to get the old money out first. This prevents you from being in that position for a long, long time, and maybe ever, because you're not paying them $38 million at age 35.
So the last thing I'll say, and then we can go to a break real quick before we come back for best most interesting, is I think an interesting guy to look at in terms of how Tatis's career might play out from just the arc, not trading or teams, is Alex Rodriguez.
Mm-hmm.
He hit 36 home runs at the age of 20, which, first of all, can we just appreciate that for a second, that he hit 36 home runs? But he hit 23 home runs in 1997, his age 21 season. He didn't hit less than 30 home runs again until he was 35. First of all, Alex Rodriguez, for all of the things that, steroids, whatever, the guy had an absolute ridiculous career. But he was, until 2010, when he was 34. So from 1997 to 2010, he hit at least 30 home runs every year. So that's 34. So roughly, and right, Rodriguez, a guy who started at shortstop, moved to third base, right? You can, to elongate his career, because Chris, you mentioned the idea, right? A guy at shortstop, typically you see his athleticism, you can see him get older more visibly than a guy at first base. It's just like, Russell Westbrook. You're going to see him fall off more quickly than you see a guy like Steph Curry, because Steph Curry is not depending on just sheer athleticism and being quicker and faster and trying harder than everybody else, right? So it wouldn't be out of the realm of possibility for him to hit 30 home runs for the next 13 years. Or even if he only does it for the next 10 years, even if he only does it for 7 years.
Right.
Even if it's not nearly as good as we think or it could be, we're still talking about he's 30 in 8 years. And you got more than 50% of a good Tatis. You got more than 50% of the contract. You got the Tatis that you quote unquote paid for. And I think even when you get to that point, which seems like an underperforming scenario, then at that point you feel like it's worth it, especially if you have the success that you're hoping the Padres have at some point in the next 10 years.
Yeah, absolutely.
Coming up next, we're going to take a quick break and then come back. Best, most interesting of the weekend. You're watching 110 Daily on the 110 Sports Network.